Welcome to M&A's webinar, Church Planting Movements. Today we're going to be looking at the Mid-South Church Planting Network, and I'm Chris Vogel, Director of Next Gen Pastors and the Director of Ecosystems Development for M&A. Church planting is not a cookie cutter operation. There is no church planter 1, 2, 3 step that you can purchase online and know how to do everything just right. Maybe another way to put it in a more kinder, gentler, revised adage goes, there's more than one way to skin an eggplant. So with starting new churches, it's the same thing. Now, each month for the next couple months, we're going to be highlighting a different movement around the country to hear what the Lord is doing there and discern best practices. This will give you a chance to hear, learn, and pray more effectively. And so I'm glad to have with us today the director of the Mid-South Church Planting Network, Clint Wilcke. Clint serves as the coordinator and catalyst for Mid-South Church Planting Network. It's a network of 4 presbyteries that have partnered together by identifying, placing, and training planters in Mississippi, West Tennessee, Arkansas, and Southeast Louisiana. And before this gig, he was the founding pastor of Christ Covenant in Hernando, Mississippi. Started back in 2008. Clint's married to Kathy, and they have 5 children. Also with us is Josh Kynes. Josh has been a church planter in Lafayette, Louisiana since 2015. Married to Emily, and they have 6 children. Then there's Hunter Brewer. He's planting Trinity Church in Collinsville, Tennessee, a suburb of Memphis. He helped start and was the first coordinator of the Mid-South Church Planting Network. He's founder and former senior pastor at Madison Heights Church, PCA, near Jackson, Mississippi. And then last but not least is Harris Bond. After pastoring in Alabama for 11 years, moved with his family to Monroe, Louisiana. In 2019, began the work of scratch planting there. Married to Laura Beth, and they have 3 children. Now, before we jump in, as always, want to say to those who are joining with us, please feel free to open up the chat box, the Q&A box, and if you've got any questions, post them there, and we will try our best to answer them. If you are watching us on Facebook, hopefully I'll be able to see those questions, but they're on another screen. I don't usually follow that as well. So just to start off with our time here, Clint, what is the Mid-South Church Planting Network? I gave a little of the geographical or presbytery divisions, but give us a little of the history, the parameters, the goals, objectives. Tell us all that you can in 30 seconds about, okay, give a bit longer than that.
You give me 35 seconds. So you're such a kind guy. Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Yeah. Real privilege to serve the network now for about 2 years. The history of the network begins in some ways just before Hunter Brewer finished planting his church with a group of guys planting churches in Covenant Presbytery, kind of Metro Memphis. And God was helping us, think about planting, pooling resources, calling one church planter. And then God graciously raised up in Hunter's transition an opportunity for him to really take his wisdom and vision to 4 different presbyteries who have all been partner churches in resourcing the work of church planting over the last going into 7 years now. We've raised about $1.7 million given directly to the planters and their work, or helping the network leaders to figure out ways to serve. So God has been very gracious. We've particularized 3 churches in the Mid-South Church Planting Network, and we have 7 active church plants right now currently going on. It is made up of, or overseen by, I should say, by an executive committee of men from those partner churches in those 4 presbyteries, including their M&A chairman. So sometimes networks are, in our PCA vernacular, are they really Presbyterian? And I would say they're very Presbyterian in many ways, because each of our committee chairs who serve on the executive committee also help us find places and help recruit planters and help find funding as well. And of course, there's M&A committees that have to approve that work as a whole, and they have to pass credentials. And so all that together, the Mid-South is simply partnering, coming alongside, cheerleading the work of church planting amongst those 4 presbyteries. That's Mississippi. North Mississippi is Covenant Presbytery. That's Metro Memphis. in West Tennessee, Arkansas, Little Rock, and kind of further south. All the rest of the state of Mississippi, Mississippi Valley in central Mississippi, Grace Presbyterian, South Mississippi, and then Southeast Louisiana, which is most of Louisiana in some ways. So that's the geography. That's who oversees the work. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so you touched on a little bit with the whole idea that it is a network really being Presbyterian. What are the advantages you've seen, and Hunter, as you've been helped get this off the ground? How has it been able to better serve the presbyteries, the church planters, the movement forward by having a network? What has that done for the momentum with respect to church planting?
Yeah, Hunter, why don't you take that first stab at it, and I'll fill in stuff too from my space, my thoughts.
Sure, Chris. When I was pastoring Madison Heights in Mississippi Valley Presbytery, I was also the chairman of the M&A committee for the presbytery. And one of the things that we struggled with was, we only met 5-6 times a year. And when we met, I was only able to get a certain percentage of the committee there once, twice, maybe 3 times a year. And then when they were there, they were wanting to be a part of the M&A committee. They were wanting to see churches planted, but these were either teaching elders or ruling elders who were very busy in their own churches and in their own sessions. And so it was really difficult and challenging to develop any kind of momentum or any steps forward in terms of planting churches as a presbytery, multiplying churches. And so with the network, it was very clear early on that here was a organization that could come alongside the presbytery, could come alongside the M&A committee and say, look, we know you're busy. We know you have your own churches, you have your own sessions, you have your own families, you have your own other activities. We can help you. We can serve as a catalyst for church planting. We're not going to take over. We're going to assist you. We're going to be the point guard, and we're going to help get you the ball in the right place for the right layup or the right shot. And that was pretty easy to see very early on that was a distinct reality and possibility for the future.
Good.
And I'd add to that too is I think Hunter's exactly right. In our M&A committees, it's very hard to keep your eyes on the ball and knowing where the needs are. And so just having a ministry coordinator, director, what have you, you have somebody to go to and talk to. What's going on in your area? What about this church I've heard about? So a lot of times it's, again, reconnecting people to resources and connecting them to those opportunities that may fit in line with their philosophy of ministry and desire to be obedient to the Great Commission.
Let's hear from the three of you who are planting right now, and we'll get back into the whole and looking at the particulars. Tell us a bit about when you started, how's it going, where are you at in the point of the plan? I think Josh, you started in 15, right?
That's correct.
So you've been at this the longest, at least in this planning phase. So tell us about what's happening in Lafayette.
Yeah, we moved here about in 2015. A little bit of a different scenario that we moved to the site a little before. Raising support. Well, we had support. I was coming off the mission field, so we had support, partial support raised. And so moving to the field a little bit sooner than normal, we were able to kind of get here, do some fundraising, and just kind of settle into the community, which is invaluable because Acadiana, the region surrounding Lafayette, is a very unique country unto itself. That's funny, but I meant to say culture, but it's both the same thing. It's a very unique culture. It's a world unto itself. And so being able to get here and get established in the community to begin learning some of those things were huge. We've been going now we actually had our first public worship service in August of 2016, the week before the Great Flood here in Lafayette. And so, right off the bat, wanted to start the plan and then had to push pause. We spent about the next 6 to 8 months mucking houses and doing mercy relief and things of that nature. And so, seriously changed the kind of progression and outlook on the ministry. And so 2 years, kind of slow process, slow and steady and methodical and just real struggle. And then around late 2018, 2019, early 2019 began seeing some real growth. And so we've been excited about that. In July of 19, in a traditional culture like Lafayette, we recognized that we needed a more traditional space to meet in because of the heavy kind of Catholic and traditional kind of cultural dynamic here. And so the Lord opened a door for us to purchase a building a little prematurely, to be honest, where we were financially, but we felt like it was central to the needs of us moving forward as a church. And so purchased that. I've been in that building since July of 2019, and it's been a real boost for us. It really changed the outlook of ministry for us in this community. Currently training elders and deacons, moving towards particularization this year. And so that's a long process kind of getting to this point, but we're excited about the future and opportunity. We're still not self-sustaining at this point, but the Lord continues to provide. We've had a tough community with the old being kind of an old dependent culture and community. It's been very tough for us here, but the Lord continues to provide and serve us faithfully. And so we're confident in the days ahead as well.
Well, thanks. So Harris, what's happening in Monroe, Louisiana?
Yeah. We moved. Laura Beth and I and our children moved to Monroe, West Monroe, Twin Cities area, Northeast Louisiana, in the summer, I think June of 2019. Didn't know anybody there, and there was no. It was a scratch plant, and what we've done in a nutshell is just all you have is meeting people at that point, networking, intentional in terms of evangelism and gathering people into your home a lot and just meeting people. And then soon there's an orbit, and we've kind of gone from a pure networking and gathering phase to God bringing together a group of more solidified core group. So now we're in kind of I guess you could say core group phase of developing, kind of from the foundations up, but also kind of a roadmap to being able to launch in public worship. We're praying for this fall. And in the midst of that, much of that has been in the kind of pandemic context as well. And some, there were some storms that did a lot of damage as well, and opportunities there. But God has been very faithful. What's encouraging is it's a mixture of unchurched or de-churched and believers, and some of those we believe are new believers now, and that's been a very encouraging thing and a very exciting thing. And hopefully this Sunday, I'm anticipating our core group will kind of finalize a name for what we pray will be a new church here in Monroe and West Monroe, Louisiana.
Oh, great! Finally have a name. That's good.
Yeah.
But Hunter, so and you planted before, right?
That's correct.
And you're doing it again.
That's right.
Wow.
I am.
Okay. So tell us about
what's wrong with you.
Fool me once, fool me twice.
So what's happening in Collierville?
Sure, Chris. So Collierville is a suburb of Memphis, Tennessee, and we moved here about a year and a half ago. Didn't know anyone other than some, secondarily we knew some people in the Memphis area, but we didn't really know anyone. There were 5 families from Independent Presbyterian Church that came with us to help start this church. And in God's providence, we gathered several more families that had moved to the Collierville area or Germantown, which is the 2 cities are side by side, that they had previous contacts with people in other cities that knew me, and they recommended to them, meet this guy, consider being a part of this church plant, and they did. And it was a wonderful infusion of families and individuals. And really, I'm very thankful for those PCA churches and other places that have such a vision for church planting, because even though they were not part of church plants, these were mature, established churches. They came to me with an understanding of what church planting is and how it works and why it's important. And I'm very grateful for that. That was significant. So we had our first Sunday morning service 2 weeks ago, but we're still meeting as a core group. We're going to kind of wait until COVID sort of rescinds into the distance. And we're planning to have our launch service August 15th. But all's going well despite the difficulties of COVID, and very thankful to be here and very thankful to be planning a second time.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. So it sounds like each of you are let me back up this way. PCA is a Southern denomination. Really, do we need more PCA churches in the South? There's there's other places we should be going, right? But I'm hearing there's a lot of distinction, diversity in each of those areas. I mean, Lafayette's not Collierville, and Monroe. From being in Monroe, West Monroe and Monroe are two different, can have their own differences as well. So what have you found distinctive in those regions? And Josh, you mentioned a little bit because of it's a more traditional and heavily Roman Catholic community in Lafayette down in southern Louisiana. So what have you found that maybe has been a surprise that you just like, I didn't expect this when I started the church plant?
Yeah, I think for our context, it's a largely Catholic context, as Chris mentioned. But the other end of that spectrum is the largest percentage outside of that would be more charismatic and Pentecostal groups here. So, in my little idealistic brain, which is how I tend to function, we fit the perfect little happy medium between the two, and we'd reach that large non-committed middle between the chaos of the two. And in actuality, was surprised to find out I'm actually in no man's land. So everybody's kind of mentioned the scratch church plant nature of it. There was nothing here, nobody here when we came, started meeting people when we got here, kind of starting from scratch. And I just felt like we'd be the ideal kind of center, but we were actually the antithesis of that. We had just enough Catholicism to scare the pants off people who wanted to get as far away from Catholicism as possible, but not Catholic enough to even consider, for people to even consider moving away from their family, which is what they were doing. It wasn't a church they're moving away from. To leave the Catholic Church is to leave their family. And so it was a unique place. I found myself looking up going, oh no, there's nothing ideal about me. And now we got to figure out how to find plan B. So, one of the first things I did was we had to kind of revamp my idea of liturgy. The most important piece of it was just taking out responsive readings. That piece alone fundamentally changed people's perceptions of our liturgy, because that was the thing. For whatever reason, it just unnerved people to degrees that I was shocked to find out. So just removing that began to, I guess, normalize people to where they could begin kind of wanting to understand a little bit more about our liturgy. And there was 100 of those little bitty things like that really made a difference for us early on.
Yeah, that's taking that away to give the breath. Yeah, anyone else on that?
Yeah, Chris. So for us in Carterville, one of the things that when I was leading the Mid-South network that I would say regularly, at least in the Deep South, is people tend to have the perception that church planting is for Reformed people who have gathered in an area that do not have a Reformed chapel, and they need a Reformed pastor and a building. And so I try to drive home the fact that 80% or probably higher, but 80% of the population is not in church. And so if you look at Germantown and Carterville, that's 100,000 people. And there's one, so you're talking about on any given Sunday, conservatively, 70,000 people are not in church. So let's plant churches everywhere for everyone, even in the Mid-South. But one of the things I learned in moving here was that Carterville has a large, in terms of the Deep South, Asian and Indian population because of FedEx, AutoZone, Amazon, and a few other businesses. And so one of the things that I'm talking to my core group about is long term. I don't think we can do it right now, but long term, how do we reach those communities for the sake of Christ?
Yeah. Good.
And I remember reading, Chris, and just to agree with that as well, early 2000s, reading a lot of demographic studies about folks from the North moving to the South, cost of living, job opportunities, taxes, politics, more land. You can get 4 times the house. So when I even planted in 08, we always kept saying, we're really 10 years ahead of the real growth that will happen. That's exactly what's going on since Hunter's planting. Really 10, 12, 13 years later, we're seeing tons of growth. So I remember one friend living next door was from Green Bay. And so, and one of my church planting experiences. So there is a huge group of people who have no idea about the churchianity of the South. Mm-hmm. And this is why I think our evangelism and relationship building is going to be key as we plant more churches. I think Hunter grabbed this stat a long time ago. There are 60% fewer churches than there were 100 years ago per capita. And then he was kind of laid out just the average worshipers on a Sunday in a given city. There you go.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so at this point, two of you are really, just even haven't had worship yet. Josh, you're working on elders and moving towards particularization. But it never hurts to kind of ask the question. I'll phrase it this way: it's Bill Murray and Groundhog's Day. You wake up, Sonny and Cher is playing on the radio, and you realize you're starting all over again. And you're kind of going, okay, now what? So what are you going to do differently this time around? What lessons have you learned? What have you done? You said that was brilliant. I would do that again. And what would you say was boneheaded, and I would not have done that the way I did that the first time, but I did the first time around? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, first of all, I would say if y'all keep seeing me wiggling around and propping my feet up, I've ruptured my Achilles, so nothing's comfortable right now. So thank y'all for humoring my leisure sitting today. That was bothering me in the screen. I think if I went back to do some things over again, as I'm listening, like Hunter and Clint and them kind of talk about the nature of churches oftentimes being reformed outposts, is what we do. You think of sometimes with church planning. That was not at all our ambition. And when I started talking to you about the extremes between charismatic and Catholic kind of influence here, it sounds like I'm just trying to find some church people in the middle. That was not my intention at all. When we came, found that there was a lot of struggles and difficulties in the kind of religious culture of this region and area where it wasn't my effort. I was doing all the things you're supposed to do right. I was meeting people. I was in the public spaces. I was introducing evangelism, just getting to know people, listening to their story, talking to public officials, talking to community, organizers and influencers. I was doing all those kind of steps of really engaging the community, engaging the culture, trying to meet people, networking and doing those things, and try to go that route with it. And what we ended up being for first 2 years of our plant was really an outsider church. I started meeting a bunch of people who were trying to find their way. You would never find a more hospitable group of people than Cajuns. The problem is they're so tight knit here. It's got one of the highest retention rates in the country. It's hard to get to that next level of kind of community, fellowship, relationship. And so we started having all these people coming in that just wanted community, unbelieving and believing alike, that began really marking us in the early days. It really was concerning to me when we were getting started. And I didn't know what to do with that. Lord, by his grace, of no effort of mine and no real magic, formula of mine, just ended up kind of turning the tide for us. And that's changed drastically in our church now. But if I had to do some things over, I would only do it over because I've learned more about the culture now. And I understand that that getting invested in things in the community. Because so many people came in that have been wounded by other, religious communities or organizations or dynamics. We're really becoming a church for the wounded in the area spiritually, and trying to nurture them back to health and work that out. So much of our outreach feels like it's stalled in ways that just makes my heart hurt and makes me nervous a lot of days. And so I think early on I would have just gotten involved with some local community organizations and things like that in impoverished areas, and particular types of, we've got some ministries now working with folks of, in adoption agencies and people that work with single mothers and all kinds of different things, being involved in some of those, getting to know the community at that level by investment and involvement. So as the church moved forward, we already had relationship involvement to bring people into something early on would have been something I think I would do differently, but knowing what I know now would have been something I would have spent my time doing.
Oh, that's good. It helps.
Hey, Josh, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
In that? Because I'm thinking through some of the same things, and as you talked about people who are just looking for community, I mean, that's that I'm like, oh yeah, I'm nodding my head like that's exactly what we are all as a group. That's what's drawn people together with us. Were you involved in some ways in some community organizations on a surface level, and now you wish you had been more deeply as a group, kind of adopting a parish, as you will? Or were you not involved at all in any?
Yeah, so I started getting involved. That's a great question, because I focused a lot on some of the more civic organizations, like some of the Downtown Development Authority and LIDA, which is an organization in town, and another group, One Acadiana, which was kind of doing some involved in a lot of community kind of development stuff. Non-religious type things, mainly for networking and all those kind of deals. Those were great. I met a lot of people, but it was I only kind of remained on the outskirts of some of those organizations, and to go too far with those, I don't know it wasn't a whole lot further I could have gone with that in a way that was, I think, really going to serve the ultimate end. So yes, I would have gotten more involved in some of those ministries and brought people with me to invest in those early on, really to help things kind of move forward. And I think it would have actually helped some of those outsiders start finding some inroads into the community as well, as much as it was, helping me to do the same. So, I think I would have done more that direction by way of local, not civic. I'm not losing my word right now. More mercy ministry type things.
Yeah.
Some of those kind of those ministries, and not even ministries, but organizations in that regard.
It sounds like you described that. It's not an either or. They're both really good paths to go. But when you mentioned doing the ministry focus, you said bring someone along with you. Mm-hmm. So it sounds you have the opportunity of discipling in that context rather than it being you making all the inroads.
That's right.
It's a multiplication. That's really helpful. That's right. That's good.
Yeah, I'm having to play a lot of catch up right now from the standpoint of bringing people along, because I shouldered all that burden early on, not really recognizing what I was doing, creating some scenarios. And so now I'm shouldering all the burden of kind of trying to pull people in that direction. And it's a lot. And so early on, I think I would have changed that process.
So you're saying that God had to blow out your Achilles so that you could let other people serve. That's what you're saying.
I've blown out a lot over the past 2 years. So I'm feeling much better now, even though I'm uncomfortable. So
love you, brother.
But what you're describing is what I hear almost every church planter is realizing further down the road of like, I've been trying to do it all, and that's just not. It's not healthy, and it's just not going to make it work.
That's right.
And any other lessons learned?
Yeah. So Chris, I think, second time around for me, and, I would joke with the core group that I'm going to make new mistakes. And so, but what I've found is a little bit more freedom and to go slower. Mm-hmm. And I remember with Madison Heights thinking this is going really fast, and I'm focusing so much on the church plant, and is it supposed to be this challenging and work this much? And I would have older church planters, and unfortunately I didn't have a coach who would say to me, it's okay to slow down. And so as I went into this the second time, COVID has made it challenging. So I was hoping that it would be a little bit easier the second time around. I think COVID has made it difficult, in that had COVID not transpired, I do think that it would have been easier the second time around. And the analogy I use is like when you have your second child, how it's more automatic. And so I do feel a little bit more freedom to go slower.
Mm-hmm.
But, so I think that's the one nugget of wisdom I've gained thus far.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
I feel like the other guys can answer the, what would you do differently? What do you wish you would know? Ask me that in another few years, but I will say, and this is piggybacking, but it's good. You should have goals. You should have steps. You should have strategy. And there's a fine line with me of relying on your ability to do all that and realizing this is not my gig. This has to be God through his spirit. And when that's the case, and yes, he has used COVID as a training ground and a school for this. But there is very much the lesson of holding those plans, not with white knuckles, and learning how to wait. And as Hunter said, how to go slowly. And in that sense, be freed and hopefully repenting over being the management guy. Mm-hmm. And I think I said this to Clint one day. I feel like it's like good running backs in football that have a few years. The best ones are the ones who know right when the ball is snapped to be a little bit patient for the hole to come open, instead of just immediately trying to shoot. And I'm not there yet. I'm immediately trying to shoot, and then I have to stop, and I shoot, and then I stop. But I'm learning how to be patient in all the movement. Mm-hmm. And it takes a heart attack, or it takes COVID, or it takes somebody having to quarantine that's a key person to learn that. But God is gracious.
Yeah. And
he literally did. We didn't say it, but you literally did have a heart attack, and Josh literally had a wife that needed to be cared for, and we had a church planter die in 2000, early 2020. So so I often say, and I've said to the guys before, hey, what's going on in the Mid-South? Do you want to come plant there? And I said, well, this is not a number one. This is not a number one combo at McDonald's. If you want to come and die and suffer, yeah, we'd love to have you. Join us in the COVID crisis. We'd love to have you. So these brothers have taught me a ton about trusting and resting in the Lord through their own weaknesses that God has put upon them, so he would get the glory and he would show other people how they might come alongside them and serve. Yeah. So thank you for saying that, Harris, but you literally did have a heart attack.
Yeah. A question. There's a question here from Andrew Lamb, Clint, that would kind of go to you about the Mid-South. I don't know if you saw that. Again, each network kind of has their own philosophy and how they do it. So in the Mid-South, is there any sense of connections as the network, or then maybe are we seeing this in the local, the more regional church plants?
I saw that question a little bit earlier. Tease that out a little bit. You're saying what's unique about the Mid-South? Are we doing things like other networks? Clarify that a little bit.
Yeah, is it reaching beyond normal PCA? And however you want to define normal PCA, are you seeing growth in that direction?
Well, I think a lot of these guys who are kind of front lines, right, we're learning about our network, our geographical region by the kinds of things these guys are engaged in. And so I always know church planters are engaging in civic things to learn about the culture of the place. So And invariably, and in my experience, and I assume they could share for ad nauseum, the different pastors they have met, the partnerships. I mean, even early in our church plant, we were able to we had multiple denominations giving and coming and doing home rehab with us in our community. So it became much more of a broader gospel outreach and shared responsibility. And I think, so I know Andrew's connected to Third Mill a lot. And even Pratt said last Sunday, how do we work together in unity and love, bearing this gift out to the world? And I think church planting creates that partnership. And in my work, I'm obviously talking to Baptist network leaders, gone to some of their meetings, trying to learn some of their practices, trying to share some of the practices we have learned. And then even reaching out to say, what do you think, guys who are just in an area, who are pastors, who like planting but don't know where to begin, even they give a lot of insight into why we haven't planted. What do we need to do resource-wise or partnership-wise to build bridges? Because a lot of churches have done territorial kinds of things and hurt each other and hurt the name of Christ. So how are we going to share the love of Christ? And where we agree, and we agree on a whole lot more with a lot of the evangelicals than we disagree, how do we do ministry together in particular areas? Don't know if that answers, but that's...
No, that helps. Any of you guys, what have you seen as far as making those connections? When you're, I found that once have established a church and we're, post planting and we're in renewal phase, those are our only two real options. Either you're going up or you're in a lifelong context of renewing. That we can get so focused on us and maintaining this entity, which is a problem in itself. In the planting phase, you can often have a view that's much larger. So have you had any interactions with those outside of even just your plant that has a kingdom engagement in the context of church planting?
When I got here, I began, because they're, what's normal PCA is no PCA in Lafayette. So we were starting from scratch on just what is a Presbyterian. That scared the mess out of people, which is funny for me, because the first time I was invited to a Presbyterian church, I said it sounded like a cult. I wasn't going there. I kind of understood we sound really funny, and anytime I had to, we settled on parish church, even though I really don't like the idea of masking the, Presbyterian in the name. It's not my ideal. It's not what I would have told you I'd never do that. But here it got to be such an issue. Like, people just went glassy eyed immediately. We chose to do that because we needed the opportunity to keep speaking. And so I met with, like Clint's saying, I've met with a lot of church planting networks in the area that are, affiliated with the Baptist church here. I have a close friendship with an Anglican, pastor here in town that we meet regularly. We started to kind of get it off the ground a year ago, a classical school, trying to help. I was really just partnering with him. He was going to be doing it. He wanted my help to come alongside and work with him on that, which that's still in the works in the coming couple of years, opportunities to do that. And that's really just coming alongside him because he needed the help, and frankly we had enough kids to get the school off the ground ourselves. So literally is what he told me when we talked about it. So some opportunities there were huge. The other interesting thing is, as we continue to grow, because there's not a lot of Bible teaching churches here in this area, I think we have 5 and potentially 6 guys in our church right now who are future church planners or pastors who want to serve the Acadiana region. I have Alec Moyer, who is a RTS student who's from Acadiana, that as soon as he found out we were doing something, came here to finish up his seminary to be a part of what we're doing. Another guy moved from Washington, who's from the area, Washington State, moved to the area to plant a church, found out there was a PCA church here, got connected in with Alan Foster and Clint, got a hold of me, and is now working alongside our church with the potential and considering planting a church in the area. And I've got 2 more guys who are ministerial students or who are looking towards ministry in the future, young guys that are beginning to kind of test their call right now. and then two guys who've come in recently that I'd say more Reformed Baptist kind of mentality for now, but who have a real heart for ministry in the area, have real gifts for teaching and preaching, who I don't know what the future hold. Will we bring them in the fold, or would they just launch out from us in kind of Baptist churches? I'm open for either. I've told them I just want to be a part of what the Lord's doing in Acadiana, to see more Bible preaching, teaching, gospel centered churches multiplied, and so they want to be a part of it as well.
So you're telling me you're not particularized yet. You're 5+ years into this, and you've got 6 people in the pipeline that are not just being nice, well-behaved members, or at best an elder here or there, but that might be launching out from you to plant out of your church or in the region.
All because of my master plan that had none of that. And
you had all this thought out.
I turned around, and before I knew what happened, I mean, honestly, it's Harrison was saying a minute ago when he was talking about plans, you look at it, and I literally, there's not a single solitary thing I've planned that has come through. And everything that I did not even imagine has happened in its own way. So, I learned from all my mistakes working with Hunter at Madison Heights when he planted, I was working with him at Madison Heights. So I had this thing licked, but little did I know I still had a lot to learn, and the Lord's the one who plants his church. And so, we're amazed by seeing the folks who show up.
Yeah, Chris, one of the things that I've noticed, at least social media perhaps, is that people always make comments about the Deep South and the Mid South based on perception and their knowledge of the history of the PCA. And a lot of times it's not accurate. And so what is, in terms of normal in our region, well, Shelby County has almost 1 million people. This is in Memphis, Tennessee, almost 1 million people. There are 4 PCA churches. So that in itself is outside the normal. When Jackson has almost 20, Birmingham has almost 25. I don't know what normal is in our area. And so I do know what the normal should be, and that's planting churches, multiplying churches in the Memphis metro area. And so for us, I get excited about all of the communities and areas that there are not PCA churches where we could plant and multiply in the future. Now, I don't say that in terms of there aren't other good churches. There are plenty of good churches, but denominationally speaking, it's a blank canvas here. And in terms of support raising, it was interesting how many churches turned me down because they said, we don't need, our focus in terms of multiplication is outside of the Southeast. And they wouldn't even hear me in terms of there are 1 million people in Shelby County and there are 4 PCA churches. So I think sometimes we have to be careful about that in what we think and say, but I'm excited about the opportunity that it presents to us in terms of multiplication.
No, that is good. So Clint, what's the network doing then for moving forward for these guys? What being the self-centered people, what services do you offer me?
I think we've said this before, sort of the 3 C's: catalyst, coaching, and cohort. My work in creating conversations that have never happened, realizing that a lot of those PCA churches are not necessarily talking to each other, or I'm always surprised, even in my work, of some of the great ministries or things going on in one PCA church in the same city they have no idea what's going on, and the next church doesn't know. Instead of even sharing some of those good ministry practices, evangelism or discipleship. So you realize that and this is what Hunter realized early on, that this catalyzes, brings people together into a partnership. The partnership is everything. It's everything. Yeah, and it's the Philippians 1:5. Paul's celebrating the partnership with the Philippians in his ministry to go out. That's what we're doing in church planting. We're partnering together, and we're resourcing each other financially and beyond that. And so that lends to the next C, coaching. How we believe coaching is the most effective way to remain on the field, to be encouraged, to think through these things critically. I mean, Josh is one of the hardest people to coach in all of the network. He knows that, but I love him anyway. But he's always thinking great ideas. So how do we figure out the best ideas, the best strategies with the guy on the ground who's seeing it every day? So I think coaching is invaluable. And then the cohort realities are naturally church planting kinds of things that attract church planting kinds of people. Hence, you have 5 to 6 guys, interested in Josh's work, and the same thing with Hunter. And so what do we do with these men and women who are thinking long term about maybe going and investing in a city and being a part of a church plant as they move? Lots of, again, people moving all the time. I know Hunter's experienced that. We share a big highway together. People are moving all the time because they just can. And so then how do we train those people who are moving into our areas or equipping them to move out of our areas into other maybe church planting areas? We believe that's why we're partnering with Next Gen Pastors, because we think that's a way in which we train and equip our guys to think through some methodology and have some mentored cohorts that will really create a way of both accountability and encouragement. And that's happening kind of organically. We're just trying to add a layer to that strategically so we know where a guy would fit best. As I said, even in missions conference a couple weeks ago, guys coming from Boston are going to have a hard time planting Lafayette. So, we've got to grow up some of our own guys from our own cultural moments, we might say, and equip them, encourage them in these 2 or 3, 4-year ongoing cohorts dealing with those specific areas. That brings along Parakaleo, which we've started to partner with as well. Deneen Blevins, who's now executive director, but Emily Hartman, who works regionally with the wives, the church planting wives, to encourage them. They're not crazy for marrying a pastor who's also a church planter, even for the second time. And so how do we encourage those women?
Not second marriage.
Yeah, not second marriage.
I wanted to make sure everything.
I'm so thankful. Clarity. This is your gift. Thank you.
I'll make sure.
And so how does Parakaleo encourage those women? And so Emily Hartman is doing a lot of coaching, virtual coaching, especially through 2020. And then the third piece I think we're trying to figure out is how can we do evangelism together long term? What are going to be the means by which we do evangelism? One-on-one, small group kinds of context, outreach, and then what was that mode of evangelism look like? I mean, that's the real question, right? We have lots of old methods or plans, modes in the past, but how are we going to reach the next generation with the gospel? And so I think one piece we're trying to work hard on in 2021 and 22 is what will be our evangelism strategy through church planting, which invariably, I believe, in my estimation, that will immediately be taken in by the churches for renewal and equipping the saints to do the work of ministry, Ephesians 4. So that's sort of what I see a way in which we support. I think Hunter learned this early on, and I have learned it henceforth, is that, connecting money and resources is one thing, but connecting the planters together regularly, having them be coached, having their wives be encouraged, and being reminded they're not crazy in church planting is a huge part of how we keep people on the field.
Can I say something just to because Clint can talk about himself and everybody would just think he's making his pitch. But from our standpoint, from those of us who are on the field who've been doing it for 5 years, the network's resource early on, providing coaching for me when I was kind of isolated in the Lafayette area, honestly was a lifesaver for me. I like to verbally process and work through things with guys, talk through the kind of vision ideas and things of that nature. And having that resource, I don't know. I was coming off the mission field. I was having some reverse culture shock. My brain, emotions, everything were through the roof on struggle. And having that coach there just to call in, check on me more than just giving me ideas for church planning, but checking on my soul, checking on those kind of things. And in this later stage of church planning, Clint is just faithful. When I won't slow down, when I refuse to slow down, when I often feel like I can't slow down, he just calls and checks. And and is constantly building into me, and then constantly setting before us resources, from getting away and getting together with other church planners, to resources for my wife with Parakaleo, to all of those things. Are honestly, it's a fundamentally different experience, where Hunter and I were just kind of sink or swim, figure it out, kind of do it. And that the benefit there was just that we had the two of us at least laboring together when we were working at Madison Heights. It's just a fundamental different reality, having those resources available to us. So, we appreciate the financial help. That was enormous for us in the early days, but having that resource along the way has just been huge.
Yeah, good. We have about 10 minutes left, and want to have a couple things. One, just want to ask for all of you. So it's 2030. We're a little less than 10 years down the road. Where is the Mid-South Church Planting Network? What's happening in those 4 presbyteries? Now, we've already heard from Josh whatever he planned didn't happen. So we'll take your insights for what that's worth. But yeah, give me your dreams. What are you praying towards? What's the passion? What excites you to see what the Lord's doing in this area?
Hey, this is my dream, and it's a prayer. I mean, it's a prayer.
Yeah.
And the preface to it is, I'm a big believer in being deep where you are and broad in other places. It's good for everybody. That may refer to deep in your tradition and interacting with other people's, or it could be deep in your presbytery, but broad with others. And I think the church planting network, and I'm in the Presbytery of Mississippi Valley, it can help our presbytery grow in more what I call first fruits ministries. But it could also, because I do have a vested interest, it could, my dream is that there's more churches planted in North Louisiana, both in Monroe, West Monroe area, Shreveport, Bossier City, and some of our other towns and smaller and more rural places, to where there is need to have our own presbytery. That's a byproduct. That's not like my end goal or anything, but it would be a good sign of God at work, because it's not as well stewarded, I could say, in the PCA. Not that it's about a name brand, but Jesus said it. Do we believe him or not? The fields are white for harvest. And when you have had a front row seat to others who have gone from death to life, it's an amazing, amazing thing. And we want first fruits.
Yeah, that's great.
I'd follow up and listen. Clinton, Chris did not prep me ahead of time, so please take this for what it's worth. But I'm excited about what Next Gen's involvement alongside the network at this point. Trying to do kind of on the ground. Like for me, I've got these 6 guys that are here and available. Having Next Gen coming in, working with some other guys in our presbytery to begin a process of just training and equipping and serving them. Me trying to create ways of encouraging and furthering their calling and their direction while trying to maintain ministry, while trying to do those other things, seems overwhelming at times. And so I feel like I'm underserving my intern right now. I'm underserving Alec, who's pursuing ministry, and these other guys that have real gifts. Having Next Gen coming in and providing some of that training, guys in our presbytery who could be a part of that process in the local level. And when we think about Lafayette being and South Louisiana being a very unique culture, guys who understand that culture, serving that culture, honestly, is phenomenal to me. So I'd love to see that relationship continue and grow, and guys really buy into being a part of helping facilitate that at the local context. That's what I'd love to see.
Good. And if I could just share, my dream is, as I've shared before, I think is, the 3 big city hubs that with density and resources, both with people and funding, Memphis, Jackson, Mississippi, Memphis, Tennessee, Jackson, Mississippi, and Baton Rouge, with Baton Rouge extending to kind of New Orleans, and then Memphis extending to Little Rock, kind of reaching over. And Chris, you're going to do a missions conference in Little Rock. So it would be beautiful, right? The long-term goal would be being networks within themselves, resourcing, equipping, funding, church planting for those cities in the future, because we know that in all those cities and all of those places, there are churches shutting down, even while there's churches being planted. So my dream prayer is, that the Holy Spirit would come and direct us, raise up men and women in those particular cities to really share resources, share ideas, and have a robust vision for how can we participate in the gospel of the kingdom of God and free ourselves from sort of the kingdom churchianity that we on our corners that we always kind of default to, me and my church. But when we're obedient to the Great Commission and the bigger vision, the city will be glad and celebrate.
No, that is great. Yeah, and we're just about out of time. Andrew Lamb had asked about prayer requests. And so I'll give you each 2 sentences, a ministry prayer request, personal prayer request. Go.
Yeah, I think ministry prayer requests, just ongoing kind of, we're about 70% of our support. So ongoing, just kind of financial self-sustaining stability here. And then our current training of leadership is the 2 big things on our plate right now. Personally, just pray for our family. It's been a long, tough year and a lot of individual kind of struggles and strife. The Lord's been faithful, but just the Lord would continue to sustain and nurture our family and continue to grow us through it.
All right. Good. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'll
Chris,
say,
go ahead, Terrace.
I'll just say a ministry wise, it's a combination of we're looking for a meeting space, and it's a lot more involved, just searching process than I thought, and really just that the Lord would lead us to people who are being open to the gospel. The Son of Man would sow good seed through our group. Personal prayer request is just simply I've been praying this. One of our children has diabetes and type 1 diabetic, and I've had a little anxiety just in the past about COVID, just kind of protection there.
Yeah, so Chris, for us, it's from a ministry standpoint, we're moving towards our launch service in August, and there's a lot that has to take place between now and then. Secondly, we don't have a place to meet this summer. Our current location is going to be renovated from mid-May to mid-August, so we need a place to meet. Personally, we care for a family member that has Alzheimer's, and that's significantly challenging for us. It's probably the last year personally has been more challenging than the actual church plant. And so that would be our prayer request.
And Clint, for the Mid-South Network, what are your prayer requests?
Yeah,
for you?
send us, God, send His Spirit to prepare more places and people, and that He would, by doing that, would be sending more planters that would be either raised up or willing to come and suffer and serve for the sake of church planting, which is not easy. And for me personally, just wisdom in knowing what hat to wear at the right time. As Hunter knows, there's only 15 different jobs really connected to this one particular job. So just God have mercy on me and help me figure out, the next steps.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, thank you so much, guys. And thank you for all of you who've been attending. And 2 weeks from now, on March 10th, we'll pick up on our series with regard to resilient ministry with Vincent Torello and Charles Hooper. We'll be looking at the next segment there on leadership, COVID, and coaching, and the nexus of all of those. A month from now, I'll be talking with Larry Hoop, who's written an article for By Faith on the various networks. And so about once a month or so, we'll be talking with a different network just to hear what's happening and to get a sense of all that's taking place there. Well, thank you very much for joining us today with M&A Conversations. Trust we'll see you again in a few weeks. Lord bless.